Our story begins not in Germany, but with a Frenchman. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte, and at the start of the 19th century he was marching his armies all across Europe. The lands we now call Germany were then a messy patchwork of hundreds of tiny states, kingdoms and free cities. They were all loosely part of something called the Holy Roman Empire, but in truth it was neither holy, Roman nor much of an empire anymore. It was old, it was weak, and it was about to be swept away by the force of Napoleon's ambition. He saw this jumble of territories as an opportunity, a place to reorganize for his own strategic advantage and to create a buffer zone against his rivals, Austria and Prussia. Napoleon was a man who liked order, his kind of order. He completely redrew the map. He smashed the ancient Holy Roman Empire, which had existed for 1,000 years, and it simply vanished from history in 1806. In its place, he created something new, the Confederation of the Rhine. This was a collection of German states loyal to him, a sort of French-controlled superstate. This act was a tremendous shock to the system. Suddenly, old rivalries and ancient borders meant very little. The French brought with them new ideas like the Napoleonic Code of Law, which promised equality for all citizens. It was a terrifying yet strangely modernizing experience for the German people. This French domination did something quite unexpected. It planted the seeds of German nationalism. Before Napoleon, a person from Bavaria might have felt more Bavarian than German. Someone from Saxony felt Saxon. But now they all had a common enemy, the French occupiers. A shared sense of resentment and a desire for freedom began to grow. Poets and thinkers started writing about a unified German identity, a shared culture and a common language that bound them all together. They dreamed of a day when a single, strong Germany could stand up for itself, free from foreign control. This was a powerful new idea that would shape the next century. After Napoleon was finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the great powers of Europe gathered at the Congress of Vienna to clean up the mess. They didn't want to go back to the hundreds of tiny states, but they were also afraid of creating a single, powerful Germany. So they compromised. They created the German Confederation, a loose alliance of 39 German-speaking states. It was designed to keep the peace, but it was weak and often dominated by the influence of Austria. However, the idea of a united Germany, born in the struggle against Napoleon, did not go away. It lingered, waiting for a leader strong enough to make it a reality. Within the new German Confederation, two major powers eyed each other with suspicion, Austria and Prussia. Austria, with its grand capital in Vienna, was the traditional leader of the German-speaking world, an old and prestigious empire. But Prussia was the up-and-coming challenger. Located in the north, with its heart in Berlin, Prussia was known for its discipline, its powerful army, and its efficient government. It had been growing steadily for decades, building up its strength quietly and methodically. While Austria was a multi-ethnic empire with many non-German subjects, Prussia was overwhelmingly German, which gave it a natural claim to lead any future German nation. The Prussians were masters of organization. They invested heavily in education, creating one of the best school systems in the world. This produced skilled workers and loyal, literate soldiers. They also poured resources into their military, not just making it large, but also making it modern. The Prussian General Staff was a revolutionary concept, a group of highly trained officers dedicated to planning for future wars. They studied railways, telegraphs, and new types of weapons, understanding that technology would be the key to victory. This meticulous preparation meant that the Prussian army was becoming a formidable fighting machine, far more advanced than many of its rivals realized. At the same time, Prussia was driving economic change. It championed the Zollverein, or German customs union, starting in 1834. This brilliant move removed trade barriers and taxes between most of the German states, except for Austria. It was like an early version of a common market. Goods could now flow freely from Berlin to Munich, creating a huge integrated economy. This made all the member states richer and tied their economic fortunes directly to Prussia, not Austria. It was a clever way of achieving a kind of economic unification, long before political unification was even possible, subtly pulling the German states into Prussia's orbit. The stage was now set for a dramatic showdown. Austria represented the old way, a loose confederation of states with a Habsburg emperor at its head. Prussia represented the new way, a modern, industrialized and militarized state with a vision for a unified Germany under its own leadership. The question of who would lead Germany hung over every political debate and every diplomatic meeting. The economic and military groundwork had been laid. All that was needed was a political leader with the ruthlessness and the vision to force the issue and bring this new Germany into being no matter the cost. That leader was about to step onto the stage. The man who would unite Germany was Otto von Bismarck. He was not a king, but a brilliant and cunning politician who became Prime Minister of Prussia in 1862. Bismarck was a conservative aristocrat, a Junker, who had little time for dreams of liberal democracy. He believed in power, in the authority of the king, and in the destiny of Prussia. He famously declared that the great questions of the day would not be decided by speeches and majority votes that had been the mistake of the past, but by iron and blood. This was a clear and chilling statement of intent. He was prepared to use war as a tool of politics to achieve his ultimate goal, a Germany united under the Prussian king. Bismarck's plan was a masterpiece of ruthless strategy, executed in 3 carefully planned steps. The first was a war against Denmark in 1864 over the territories of Schleswig and Holstein. He cleverly drew Austria in as an ally. After a swift victory, Prussia and Austria fell to arguing over how to govern the newly won lands. This was exactly what Bismarck had intended. He needed an excuse to challenge Austria for leadership of the German states, and this dispute provided the perfect pretext. He isolated Austria diplomatically, ensuring that other European powers like France and Russia would not interfere in the coming conflict. The second step was the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. It was shockingly quick. The modern Prussian army, using its superior rifles and moving its troops by railway, crushed the Austrians in just 7 weeks. The decisive battle at Sadowa was a stunning victory, but Bismarck showed his political genius in the aftermath. Instead of humiliating Austria and marching on Vienna, he offered a lenient peace. He simply kicked Austria out of German affairs for good, dissolving the old German Confederation and creating a new North German Confederation led by Prussia. The southern German states, which were Catholic and wary of Protestant Prussia, remained independent for now. The final piece of the puzzle was France. The French Emperor, Napoleon III, was alarmed by the sudden rise of a powerful new neighbor. Bismarck knew that a war with France would be the perfect way to ignite German nationalism and bring the reluctant southern states into the fold. He skillfully provoked the French into declaring war in 1870, famously editing a telegram from the Prussian king to make it sound insulting. The Franco-Prussian War was another swift and decisive victory for the Germans. The patriotic fervor Bismarck had hoped for swept through all the German states. On January 18, 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the German princes proclaimed the creation of the German Empire with the Prussian king Wilhelm I as its Kaiser, or Emperor. Bismarck's plan was complete. The newly unified Germany was a powerhouse. It had a booming industrial economy, a world-class education system, and the most formidable army in Europe. For several decades, under Bismarck's guidance, Germany played a careful game of diplomacy, maintaining peace and consolidating its power. But after the young and ambitious Kaiser Wilhelm II came to the throne and dismissed Bismarck in 1890, Germany's foreign policy became more aggressive and unpredictable. The Kaiser wanted Germany to have its place in the sun. He began a massive naval build-up, directly challenging Great Britain's dominance of the seas, and pursued a more assertive role in world affairs, which made Germany's neighbours very nervous. This new aggressive stance helped create a tense and paranoid atmosphere in Europe. A complex web of alliances was spun, dividing the continent into 2 armed camps. On one side was the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy. On the other was the Triple Entente: France, Russia and Great Britain. Each side built up huge armies and made detailed plans for a war they all believed was inevitable. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came in June 1914 when a Serbian nationalist assassinated the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne in Sarajevo. A local crisis quickly spiraled out of control as the alliance system kicked in, dragging all the great powers into what would become World War I. Germany's plan was to fight a two-front war. It aimed to knock France out quickly with a massive invasion through neutral Belgium, and then turn its full attention to Russia in the east. But the plan failed. The French and British stopped the German advance at the Battle of the Marne, and the war on the Western Front bogged down into the brutal, static horror of trench warfare. For 4 long years, millions of men lived and died in mud, blood and misery for the sake of a few yards of ground. The war became a total war, a gruesome contest of industrial production and human endurance that bled the nations of Europe dry. By 1918, Germany was on the brink of collapse. The British naval blockade had caused severe food shortages at home, leading to starvation and unrest. A final, desperate German offensive on the Western Front failed. With American troops pouring into France, the German military knew the war was lost. Revolution broke out in Germany, sailors mutinied, workers went on strike, and the Kaiser was forced to abdicate and flee the country. The monarchy was over. On November 11, 1918, Germany's new Republican government signed an armistice ending the fighting. The German Empire, born in triumph at Versailles, had been destroyed by war, leaving a broken and defeated nation in its place. In the aftermath of the war, Germany became a republic. Its new democratic constitution was written in the city of Weimar, and so this period of German history is known as the Weimar Republic. It was actually one of the most modern and progressive constitutions in the world at the time. It gave all adults, including women, the right to vote and included a Bill of Rights that guaranteed basic freedoms. On the surface, it was a bold step into a democratic future. However, this new republic was born out of military defeat and national humiliation, a foundation of sand on which it was very difficult to build a stable house. The republic faced immense challenges from its very first day. It was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles, which the German people saw as a national disgrace. The treaty blamed Germany for the war, forced it to pay crippling financial reparations, took away its colonies and, severely limited its armed forces. This created deep and lasting resentment. Many Germans, particularly on the political right, never accepted the treaty or the republic that signed it. They spread the poisonous stab-in-the-back myth, the lie that the German army had not been defeated on the battlefield but had been betrayed by weak politicians, socialists and Jews at home. The economic situation was honestly catastrophic. To pay its war debts, the government simply printed more money. This led to hyperinflation in 1923, one of the most astonishing economic disasters in history. The German currency became completely worthless. People had to use wheelbarrows to carry cash just to buy a loaf of bread. Life savings were wiped out overnight, destroying the middle class and causing profound social chaos. Although the economy was stabilized for a few years in the mid-1920s, this golden age of Weimar was a fragile illusion. The Republic was living on borrowed time and borrowed money, mostly from American banks. Then, in 1929, the Wall Street crash in the United States triggered the Great Depression and the world economy collapsed. The American loans that had kept Germany afloat dried up. Businesses went bankrupt and unemployment skyrocketed. By 1932, 1 in 3 Germans was out of a job. People were desperate, hungry and angry. They lost faith in democracy, which seemed unable to solve their problems. This created a fertile breeding ground for political extremists from both the far left and the far right, who promised simple solutions and a strong leader to restore order and national pride. The Weimar Republic was like a patient weakened by a long illness, now facing a fatal new infection. Into this chaos stepped Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist, or Nazi Party. Hitler was, a powerful and hypnotic speaker who preyed on the fears and resentments of the German people. He promised to rip up the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the army, create jobs, and restore Germany's greatness. He gave the people scapegoats for all their problems. The victorious Allies, the Weimar politicians, the communists, and most viciously, the Jews. His message of national unity, racial purity, and revenge was incredibly appealing to a nation that felt broken and humiliated. Using propaganda, paramilitary thugs called the stormtroopers and mass rallies, the Nazis grew from a fringe group into a major political force. In January 1933, the aging President Hindenburg, under pressure from conservative politicians who foolishly thought they could control Hitler, appointed him as Chancellor. This was a fatal mistake. Once in power, Hitler moved with terrifying speed to dismantle democracy. When the Reichstag, the German parliament building, burned down a month later, he blamed the communists and used the fire as an excuse to pass emergency laws that suspended civil liberties. He banned all other political parties, took control of the press, and created a brutal police state. His secret police, the Gestapo and the elite SS, hunted down and imprisoned, tortured or killed anyone who opposed him. Germany was transformed into a totalitarian dictatorship. Hitler then turned his attention to foreign policy, beginning a path of aggression that would lead directly to World War II. He rearmed Germany in defiance of the Versailles Treaty, reoccupied the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and then demanded parts of Czechoslovakia. The leaders of Britain and France, desperate to avoid another war, followed a policy of appeasement, giving in to his demands. But Hitler could not be appeased. In September 1939, he invaded Poland, and Britain and France finally declared war. The war that followed was the most destructive in human history, a global conflict that consumed the lives of tens of millions of people. The war ended in total defeat and utter ruin for Germany. By 1945, Hitler's promised thousand-year Reich lay in ashes. Allied armies advanced from the west and the Soviet Red Army from the east, meeting in the middle of a conquered Germany. Cities were bombed into rubble and the country was overwhelmed by a tide of refugees. As the victorious powers entered, they uncovered the full horror of the Nazi regime, the concentration and extermination camps, where the Nazis had systematically murdered 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, along with millions of other victims. With Hitler dead by suicide in his Berlin bunker, Germany was occupied, disgraced, and physically destroyed. The nation was now at the complete mercy of the victorious Allies. After the war, Germany was a broken land. The victorious Allies, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, divided the country and its capital, Berlin, into 4 occupation zones. Their initial plan was to work together to denazify and rebuild Germany, but this cooperation did not last long. A deep ideological chasm opened up between the democratic Western Allies and the communist Soviet Union. This was the beginning of the Cold War, a global struggle for power and influence, and Germany became its central battleground. The former Allies were now bitter rivals, and their rivalry would tear Germany in two. In 1949, the 3 Western zones were merged to form a new country, the Federal Republic of Germany, commonly known as West Germany. It was established as a democratic state with a capitalist economy, with its capital in the small city of Bonn. With massive financial aid from the United States through the Marshall Plan, West Germany began a remarkable economic recovery, often called the Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle. In response, the Soviets established their own state in their zone, the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany. It was a communist dictatorship tightly controlled by Moscow, with East Berlin as its capital. A stark border, the Iron Curtain, now ran through the heart of Germany. Life in the two Germanys was dramatically different. West Germany became a prosperous, free and stable democracy. Its citizens enjoyed freedom of speech, freedom of travel and a high standard of living. In contrast, East Germany was a repressive police state. The economy was centrally planned and often struggled to provide basic goods. The secret police, the Stasi, created a terrifying atmosphere of surveillance and suspicion, with friends and neighbors spying on each other. There were no free elections and no freedom of speech. Unhappy with these conditions, millions of East Germans fled to the west, most of them through the open gateway of Berlin, which was still divided between the powers. This mass exodus of skilled workers and professionals was a disaster for the East German regime. To stop the flow of people, the communist government took a drastic and brutal step. On the night of August 13, 1961, they began to build a wall. The Berlin Wall was a concrete and barbed wire barrier that sliced right through the city, separating families and friends. It became the most potent and ugly symbol of the Cold War, a physical manifestation of the division between freedom and tyranny. For nearly 30 years, the wall stood as a grim reminder that Germany was not one nation but two, locked in a global ideological conflict. For decades, the division of Germany seemed permanent. The Berlin Wall stood as a concrete certainty, a grim fixture of the European landscape. But by the late 1980s, cracks were beginning to appear in the communist bloc. The Soviet Union, under its reformist leader Mikhail Gorbachev, was struggling with a failing economy and was no longer willing or able to prop up the unpopular communist regimes of Eastern Europe with military force. A wind of change was blowing. In Poland, the Solidarity movement gained power. In Hungary, the government began cautiously opening its borders to the West. The foundations of the Iron Curtain were starting to crumble. This new atmosphere of freedom inspired the people of East Germany. Throughout 1989, peaceful protests grew larger and more daring. Every Monday, huge crowds gathered in the city of Leipzig chanting "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people." They demanded free elections, freedom of travel, and an end to the repressive regime. The East German government was paralyzed, unsure how to respond without the backing of Soviet tanks. The pressure became unbearable. Tens of thousands of East Germans were fleeing to the west through newly opened borders in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, making the Berlin Wall itself seem increasingly absurd. The breaking point came suddenly and almost by accident. On the evening of November 9, 1989, a flustered East German government official, Günther Schabowski, was giving a live press conference. When asked when new, more liberal travel laws would take effect, he shuffled through his papers and mumbled, "As far as I know, effective immediately without delay." The news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, huge crowds of East Berliners gathered at the checkpoints along the wall, demanding to be let through. The overwhelmed and confused border guards, with no clear orders, eventually gave in and opened the gates. The wall had fallen. What followed was one of the most joyous celebrations in modern history. People from East and West Berlin flooded through the checkpoints, laughing, crying, and embracing strangers. They climbed onto the wall, dancing and singing, and began to tear it down with hammers and chisels. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a powerful symbol that the Cold War was over. With the barrier gone, the political reunification of Germany happened with breathtaking speed. On October 3, 1990, less than a year after the wall fell, the German Democratic Republic officially ceased to exist, and its territory joined the Federal Republic of Germany. After 45 years of painful division, Germany was one country again. The reunification of Germany was a moment of immense joy, but it also presented enormous challenges. Merging the prosperous capitalist West with the dilapidated communist East was a monumental task. The East German economy had collapsed. Its industries were outdated and its infrastructure was crumbling. The West German government poured trillions of marks into rebuilding the East, a process that was expensive and sometimes painful. Unemployment soared in the eastern states, and many people felt like second-class citizens in their own newly united country. It would take more than a generation to bridge the economic and psychological gaps between Ossis, that's Easterners, and Wessis, Westerners. Despite these difficulties, unified Germany has become a remarkable success story. It has navigated the complex process of reunification to become the undisputed economic leader of Europe. Its economy is the fourth largest in the world, built on a powerful combination of high-tech manufacturing, engineering excellence, and a strong focus on exporting its world-famous products, from cars to machinery. The nation has also fully embraced its role as a stable, reliable democracy at the heart of the European Union, working to promote peace, cooperation, and integration across the continent. Germany has transformed from a source of conflict into a pillar of stability. Germany has also undertaken a profound and honest reckoning with its dark past. Instead of hiding from the horrors of the Nazi era, the country has made confronting this history a central part of its national identity. Memorials to the victims of the Holocaust are prominent features in its cities, and education about the period is mandatory in schools. This commitment to remembrance and atonement has earned Germany immense respect on the world stage, and has been crucial in rebuilding trust with its neighbors and with Jewish communities worldwide. It is a powerful example of how a nation can learn from its most terrible mistakes. Today, in 2025, Germany stands as a testament to resilience and renewal. From the ashes of Napoleon's wars, the trauma of two world wars, and the pain of Cold War division, It has emerged as a peaceful, prosperous, and respected global power. Its journey has been a long and often tragic one, a story of fragmentation and unification, of catastrophic failure and remarkable recovery. The nation that was once the epicenter of Europe's deadliest conflicts is now a cornerstone of its peace and prosperity. The journey through time has brought Germany from a fractured land of competing states to a unified nation leading the way into the future.